Good morning. We are going to, we finished heaven according to the Bible, and we are going to talk today about King Solomon. So that'll be a good lesson. King Solomon was one of King David's sons. And he was a mighty man of God. And he built King Solomon's temple. Now, God had spoke to King David prior to this in his latter years and told King David that his son would be the one to carry out the temple, because God had revealed to King David that he was to build a temple or prepare to build a temple. So King David had started gathering supplies and putting things together. And right before he passed away, the Lord came to him and said, it's not going to be you that physically builds the temple. It's going to be a son of yours named Solomon. And so Solomon, King David had told him about this, and he was very, very willing to do that. Let's go to one thing I wanted to say about this is it's probably going to take me about 3 weeks to get the temple done. King Solomon done, but the temple's going to take some time. Now, there was a king that had built David's palace, King David's palace, and one of Solomon's homes. And when it come time to build the temple, King Solomon went to King Hiram of Tyre and asked for his help, because in Joppa, Jerusalem, is where the temple was built. And one of the woods that God had told them exactly what to build the temple of, its architecture, its size, he told them everything. But they needed cypress wood, which was very prevalent in Tyre. So he went with him and told him that he needed wood. King David did, and then again, King Solomon did. So they harvested the wood. King Hiram he was a great friend and confidant of King David. And he really appreciated him and wanted to help his son. So he did harvest that. Now, there's something about the temple. The temple is 45 feet tall. They didn't have mechanical means in these days. And do you remember in the Old Testament when the Lord told Joshua to kill all the giants? Joshua did not kill all the giants. There was about 150,000 left, some of which were in Israel, because remember, they had taken the daughters of Israel and had children with them. So a lot of scholars believe, and in the word, it references that, but you have to look up the cities where they say they got the workforce from. And when you look that up, it will tell you it's some of the Nephilim. So, because who else could carry stones? Who else could do that kind of thing? So we'll discuss that. And we talked a few times about King Solomon. Even in today's standard, King Solomon is the richest person that ever lived on the earth. even by today's standard. There's been no person with greater wealth. Part of that was being the son of David and being obedient to God. Because when God asked him what he wanted, he didn't say wealth. He said wisdom and knowledge. And God appreciated that. So let's talk about this. Let's go to 1 Kings 6:7. Chapter 6, verse 7. Don't you love it? Kings 1 and Kings 2 are all about all the kings. You find out what all the kings are doing. So 1 Kings 6:7. Now, this is in description of inside the temple. There was a portico, a foyer, the main room, and inside was what we call the Holy of Holies. So, and there's different measurements, and God gave those measurements to them, how it was to be built. Even when the Ark of the Covenant, you know, the cherubims that are there, you know, their wings are faced like this, so the wings touch one another, so that the Ark of the Covenant is always covered. And the Lord doesn't do anything by happenstance. He's very particular. He doesn't say, well, just around 3 feet. He tells you exactly what he wants. And we need to sometimes tune our spiritual ears in so that we can be receptive to that. We can hear that. We know what's going on. And so let's read this. The nethermost chamber was 5 cubits broad, and the middle was 6 cubits broad, and the third was 7 cubits broad. For without in the walls of the house he made narrow rests round about, that beams should not be fastened to the walls of the house. And the house, when is in the building, was built of stone, made ready before it was brought thither. Now, it says in the word that there was no sound when the temple was being built. There wasn't sound of axes. There wasn't sound of chisels. There was no sound, because King Solomon had all of the work done at the quarry. The wood cutting was not done on site, because he had reverence for what this space was and what God had intended it to be. So there was no sound that came out. And when you see, you know, every piece of wood was covered with pure gold. So the cypress wood was floated to the river in Joppa. It was cut there, it was hewn there, and then it was transported to the temple site. Again, natural human men who can carry these large foundation stones and these beams. Just think about that, because it wasn't a short distance that this all took place. They were all made ready before it was brought thither, so that neither hammer nor axe nor any tool of iron was heard in the house while it was being built. The door for the middle chamber was in the right side of the house, and they went up with winding stairs into the middle chamber, and out the middle into the third. So he built the house and finished it and covered the house with beams and boards of cedar. And then he built chambers against all the house, 5 cubits high. They rested on the house with timber of cedar. And the word of the Lord came to Solomon, saying, concerning this house which thou art in building, thou wilt walk in my statutes and execute my judgments and keep it, my commandments, to walk in them, and will I perform my word with thee, which I spoke unto David thy father. And we talked about right before David died, the Lord gave him the word. Sometime prior to that, the Lord told David to start preparing for building the temple, the house of the Lord. And when he had done that, King David had also commissioned King Hiram to help with gathering the supplies, the cedar wood primarily. But the other thing that King Hiram supplied was about 150,000 workers, because King Hiram's area today is where Palestine is and north. There were a lot of giants in that area. So now I want to talk about exactly what the measurements are. So the stones were cut at the quarry. When the cedar arrived in the river, it was cut and then transported to the temple. Now, the temple was 60 cubits long, 20 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. Now, there's 2 measurements of cubits from biblical times, 1.8 feet and 1.5 feet. And it's different. A cubit is the measurement from your elbow here to the tip of your long finger. Now, mine at 5 foot tall is going to be a lot different than someone 6 foot tall. So there's the variance. So I did the math on both ways. So the 60 cubits long would be 90 feet if you go 1.5 feet as the measurement, and 108 feet if you go 1.84, which is the other measurement. The 20 cubits wide would be 30 feet if you go 1.5, and 36 if you do 1.84. And then the 30 cubits high would either be 45 feet, 1.5, or 54 feet at the 1.84. So this is a large building. And the Lord had said he wanted the Ark of the Covenant, the Holy of Holies, to be in Solomon's temple, which had the tablets from Moses. So it was about, it had also a porch on the front of it. And on the porch, it was 20 cubits across, 10 cubits projected outward. So the porch itself was very large. And then inside that was a vestibule, which was 15 feet deep. I went ahead and figured it in feet, and 30 feet width. That's the porch vestibule area. Now the holy place, which was inside this second chamber, the holy place was 60 feet long and 30 feet wide. Again, the 45 feet up. Now, the Holy of Holies was inside the holy place, and it's 30 feet long, 30 feet wide, and 30 feet high. So it's a 30-foot cube. And that's where the Ark of the Covenant will sit. Now, the interior of the rest of the building was 45 feet high, except in that Holy of Holies area where it's only 30 feet tall. But it's inside what they call the holy place. So you go into the temple, you go into a next chamber, that's the holy place, and in that chamber you go into an inner chamber where the Holy of Holies is. The temple had all kind of precious stones throughout. All the beams, all the cedar, everything was lined with pure gold. They estimate in today's market that the temple construction, not including the workers, just the things that were used, the materials, would be between $4 and $6 billion. So he had a lot of investment, but he didn't care because he loved the Lord so much. And he saw from his father what loving the Lord meant. Now, was King David perfect? No. No. Was King Solomon perfect? No. And, he is the king that when the two women brought the baby before him to settle the thing, who's the mother, and he said, fine, cut it in half. And the real mother said, no, just let her have him. He said, that's the mother. So when God asked him what he wanted, and he said wisdom and knowledge, he was very good at, he was very knowledgeable, and he used his wisdom well in the kingdom. Now let's go to, the precious stones were from Italy and a lot of the Arab countries. That's where they gathered these stones that were embellished in the walls, in the doors, the beams. It must have been spectacular, because the Lord told him in 2 Chronicles 3:4-10, it says, and the vestibule that was in front of the sanctuary was 20 cubits long across, and the width of the whole house, it was 20 cubic, overlaid with pure gold. This is a whole room overlaid. Every piece of wood in there was overlaid with pure gold. The larger room he paneled in cypress, which he overlaid in fine gold. He carved palm trees and chain work on it. So there wasn't a plain piece of wood or material anywhere in the temple. He decorated the entire house with precious stones and beautiful gold, and the gold also was from where Italy is now and some of the Arab countries. The house beams were overlaid, the doorpost was overlaid, the walls, the doors, all overlaid with gold. Everything in the Holy of Holies was covered in gold. Walls, ceiling, everything. Now it says that there were 600 talons of fine gold. That's what it took back then to do that. Now, in today's world, that would I think it was like 1.8 billion that would be to just cover the precious stones and the gold in the building. Not the labor, just the materials. And up in where the winding circle staircase went, all of that was covered as well. And God was very specific about him with the Holy of Holies. Making 2 cherubims fashioned by carving the overlay and the wings touching. Solomon had to repay King Hiram because King Hiram had given him workers and cypress wood. Well, so King Solomon gave him 20 cities in Galilee area. And when King Hiram came to look at his payment, he didn't like it. He was not happy with it. And he told King Solomon. But King Solomon was like, oh, well, you know. But he gave him, more area to be king over. And he thought that would be okay, but it wasn't. Now, if we go to 1 Kings,
Cynthia,
yes.
with all that material wealth and so forth, where do you think that stuff lies today? Maybe the Vatican has it?
Maybe. They don't know where the Ark of the Covenant is, allegedly. They said it went to Africa, and then it came back to Europe, and so we really don't know who has it.
We know Hitler had all that stuff.
Yeah. So, someone asked, where is all those things now? I don't know. I'm sure people have them, but they're probably not saying. But if you go to 1 Kings chapter 5, 13 through 18, I'm going to just paraphrase this just because for time's sake, but write that down and you can go, the scriptures are there. The labor force was 30,000. Now, this is the ones that were in Israel. They worked in shifts. So they would work a month and he would send them back to their city for 2 months because the labor was very intense. And he sent them a lot of them came from Lebanon, and he would send them back for that period of time. Now, he had 3,300 foremen. The 3,300 foremen supervised these laborers, and they did not get the time off, just the laborers. And those were his chief deputies. He put all of them in charge because he trusted them. Now, King Solomon's other brother was named Adoniram, and he put him as the head person in charge of building the temple because King Solomon had discussed this, what the Lord had told him, and he trusted him. And his name is spelled Adoniram. Now, there were 10,000 who carried stones. There were 80,000 people in the quarry, quarrying and chiseling the stones. So that's quite a bit. His chief deputies supervised it. And the king commanded that the large stones for the foundation, and he had a system of how it was supposed to be done. So they needed the stonework to be done prior to the cypress trees being harvested and hewn and all that, because he wanted the foundation stones laid first, obviously, and the Lord had given him specific instructions about that. Now, the Jebusites were the one that quarried the stone, and they were from the city Jebal, Gebal. Now there was a large population of Nephilim in that area. This was a city that was ran by King Hiram, the man that provided the cypress wood, and that was a big friend to Solomon's father, King David. And initially, when the Lord told King David about building the temple, King David thought he was the one going to be building it. And so he started gathering the supplies that the Lord had told him, the cypress wood, all of these things. And he was the one initially that spoke with King Hiram, because King Hiram had built David's palace and many other things. Apparently, this King Hiram was your general contractor builder of the day. Now, King David had decreed about the temple to all the people before Solomon had taken over. And you can read that in 1 Chronicles 28:2. And King David was not just a king. I mean, he also, he succeeded Saul, and he really was the Lord's sovereign. He and the Lord had a very personal relationship. And many of the things that King David's children had, those mantles were passed down because of what King David did, not necessarily what they had done. And we talk about that before. It matters what your grandparents prayed over you, what your parents prayed over you. There may be people, my great-grandfather, I'm sure, prayed over me, and he died when I was a little tiny girl. And I'm sure he prayed over my father. Like I said, my father's father left when he was 6. So my great-grandfather, that's who my father learned to be a man from. And thank God he did, because he was a mighty man of God. And this same thing happened with King David, with his sons. Now, Jesse, David's father, he was also a mighty man of God. This whole bloodline feared God the Father. And it's so amazing when you look at King David, and there's prophesying in this this Old Testament about the Messiah coming. The King of Israel is coming. Now, we know that God is Jesus' father. Mary was a vessel. But even so, both Joseph and Mary are of King David's bloodline. So even if someone would say, well, he's not worthy. Oh, really? He's got royal blood. He is worthy. And he is God the Father's son. He's more worthy than that. But if they got really carnal about it, here's this why. This is why. And it wasn't happenstance that happened. It was supposed to be just like that. It was preordained from the beginning of time. I just think that when I was studying this lesson out, I was talking to probably too much yesterday at the hospital to our pastor about different things in the Bible. And, I asked him about, because it's really vague in the word about, okay, they said it's 45 feet tall. Does that mean it's a square? Is it a pyramid? Does it go up like this? Tell me how a natural man would get up 45 feet in biblical times to work on things. Just questions I had. And he explained that there were Nephilim in King Hiram's area, and biblical scholars do believe that, just from what the word says, that they were helping build King Solomon's temple. Now, David was very aware of the favor that he had. And when the Lord told him about, you're not the one going to be building the temple, the Lord didn't say just one of your sons. He said, your son, Solomon, will be the one to build the temple. And see, that's the way God works with us. He's not just, well, one of your kids is going to do great things. Nope. All your children have gifts and talents, and they also, if they're in the kingdom, they have different mantles that lie on them. Now, if they accept to choose to accept them, that's up to them. Deb has the prophet's mantle. She does. She sees things, she knows things. Now, she's quiet about it. She's not up here with the microphone screaming, well, I saw Cynthia, blah, blah, sitting on a pile of money. No, she didn't. That's not how she operates. She's very private about it. And she'll go to the person and say, when I was praying, the Lord showed me X, Y, and Z. She's accepted her mantle. But each of you have one too, including myself. And some of you have, and some of you are doing what God has called you to do, what he's given you the gifts and talents for. And some of you you're too shy. How about that? You're just too shy. I've always worked in business, and I'll give you this analogy. One of my friends is a high-end caterer in LA. And she said, Cynthia, I just need to tell you, there's front-end people and there's back-end people. I said, what? Well, there's people that like to be in the front. They like to be out with the people doing all these things. And then there's people that would just rather stay in the back, do their task, and not ever have any interaction with anybody but maybe one or two other people. That's how God made them. And I said, well, yeah, I guess I never thought about that. But I got to thinking about that. And when I interviewed for positions in California, I was working for a drug company. And when I went to my first sales meeting, now I had only met, my boss was a gentleman. Guess what everybody looked like? Me. I was like, so I went to my boss and I said, you're the only man in here? He said, yeah. I said, why is that? Male physicians don't want to see male salespeople. And I said, are you serious? He said, yes, I am. And see, that's the same way with this. See, there's people in here and out there And your job, you think that you're behind the scenes and your job isn't as important as the people that is out in the front. And that could not be further from the truth. Your job many times is more important. What you do, if you're an intercessor, if you're praying, if you're like Sister Deb over there, a prophet, and you see things and you know things, God gives you words for people. That's just as important as the fivefold ministry, which is one of the fivefold ministry. But it's important because God gives these words, just like he gave King David the word. I need you to start doing this. I need you to talk to King Hiram. I need you to get cypress wood. David gathered up all these things, and he didn't build one thing. And God came to him a second time and said, you're not the one to build the tabernacle, the temple. It's your son Solomon. Now, David had many sons, but it was specific for Solomon. And that's the way God is with us. He's very specific about what he wants each of us to do. And if you have something that your gifts and talents are, I've said this before, and my mother used to say it all the time, if you don't want to do it, God will find somebody. But I would hope that you would say, yes, I'll do that. I'll do that. Sister Carrie and Sister Sharon, they have the gift of hospitality. They're always the ones planning and doing and making and baking and whatever else. But that's their gift. And they know it. So just because you don't think that you are important because you do another job, that's not true. You are extremely important. Because when we talked about one joint supplies to the other, if I'm a hand and these two bones that connect the hand is the radius and ulna, if these two people don't show up, the hand is useless. It doesn't move. It doesn't function. And that's the same way in the body of Christ. If whatever joint you are, if the joint above you does not show up, you can't do your function. It impedes your function. So just like King Solomon, God gave him some very specific instructions about who he was to help, how he was to help, how it was to take place, what it looked like. I mean, he gave him measurements, told him what to carve in the wood, told him what stones to place as adornment. And these weren't just rocks. These were precious stones, diamonds, emeralds, sapphires, rubies, garnets. These were things that was very important because this was going to be God's house. That's what it's going to be, was God's house. And God he's not wishy-washy. He's yes and black and white. There's no gray area with God. And there's no gray area about your calling. So if you out there today feel like that God is speaking to you, you ask him. If you're not sure exactly what you're supposed to do, you ask him for divine revelation, and you ask him, Lord, open the doors that I need open to fulfill my destiny and my calling, and close the ones that's going to impede me from doing that. And give me the courage to step through the new doors that you're opening for me. Because just like when that first day on a new job or in a new school, everything's kind of confusing. You don't know where this is at. You don't know who to talk to about, I need new pens for my desk or whatever. But the third and the fourth day, it's like, oh, okay, I know how this all operates. It's the same thing with your calling. The more you use it, the better you are, the sharper your tool is. But if you keep holding back, the Lord has used me to give words to people. And at first, I did not like doing that. I didn't. But I realize now that God is doing that. It's not for me to decide. He gave it to me, and my job is to deliver it just exactly like he said, or just exactly what I saw. I'm just the vessel communicating. So think about that this week. Try to ask God to open up my spiritual ears and open up my spiritual eyes. Make me acutely aware of things that are coming to me. If you get an idea out of what our pastor calls left field, you wasn't thinking about it, somebody's name comes to you, turn your TV off and call them. Don't just think, that was just me. No, that's not just you. That's the Holy Spirit screaming down there, hey! Call Kathy. Call Marilyn. Call Sister Janet. Because there is times Carrie has texted me in the morning, knew nothing that was going on, and she'd be right on the money. Now, when somebody steps out and does that, here's what you need to do. Pick the phone up and call them and say, what you said today, I was praying about this morning, and that was my answer. And I appreciate you being brave enough and loving me enough to step out and tell me. Because, if we sit up here and just give words out, it's also very nice when you get back confirmation. What was said is exactly what happened, or that was the outcome of what is going to happen. Whether it's pastor, Sister Kathy, me, anybody. Sister Deb, tell them what you said. It was from God. Because when you get those notions and those ideas, sit quiet before the Lord and say, what are you trying to tell me? And pretty soon, you'll have a full revelation of exactly what it is. Because God uses all of us in the body of Christ to help each other. We're here to serve the Lord and serve each other and get people in the kingdom. We need to get people in the kingdom. These are the last days. Look around. There's things happening. And look at all the things that have happened in the world today already. In the Bible says will happen before his coming. Our pastor was talking yesterday. Our father passed away in 96. He said, do you know if someone would have told our father in 1996, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening, and this is going to happen, he would have said, absolutely not. There is no way in the world that's happening. But see, it creeps in just one thing at a time, and we just grow to accept it because, oh yeah, that's how things go. So tell someone this week about Jesus. If you get someone on your mind, call them. Let them know you're there for them. What do they need? And it might just be they need a prayer or a friend. But that's what we're here for. God bless you and have a good week.